Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. Make sure you go check out all my books. Start with the best-selling Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and the 2 workbooks that are fillable that go right along with it, the Threat Assessment and Defense Assessment workbooks. Also, for your children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. Now, that's a book of pictures you give to your children, and you let them go through it, and in the pictures are lessons about security and awareness, and you, the parent, go over to teamlittlebigs.com and download the free lesson plans that go with each picture. All of this is a package that makes your life, your family more aware, safer, and able to look at yourself from the attacker's point of view. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 accompanying workbooks, and The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans that exist on teamlittlebigs.com. And now, let's start the show. This is Jonathan Gilliam back in on the Experts Podcast. The truth has arrived. And I guess it's about time, because if you turn the TV on or the radio, you're not getting educated opinion, that's for sure. And you're not getting facts. I don't know what you're getting anymore. To be honest with you, I started this show and there's like several things I wanted to talk about. And then I sat here well over 2 hours looking at the headlines. And it's just crazy. Every day, I know I come on and say this, but they get weirder and weirder every single day that we're on this podcast. Things get more and more strange. And I pull up the headlines and they also, look, let's be honest, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, even 1 year ago, the headlines were fake news. I knew that when I was at CNN and I saw the reality of what was happening there. There was no doubt in my mind that opinion was put and ideology was put way before truth. They weren't interested in truth. They were interested in slant. This was back in 2016. They were interested in how whatever they wanted could be slanted to fit their narrative. And this was before Trump became the president. So it became progressively worse. 2015, when I first went over there, and having still, even before I was a contributor at CNN, I was still going there 2014, 2015, and also on Fox and several other places. And, Fox, Roger Ailes was still alive at that point. So it was just a different place. And they liked real experts or people that had real experience. That's changed, of course. Now they rely on exactly like their cohorts over at CNN. Their hosts give the majority of the opinion. And I'm sure they have researchers and people tell them how they feel, but it's always better to hear it from somebody who knows rather than somebody who repeats. But at CNN, watching Chris Cuomo, and I was going to play the soundbite, but quite frankly, it's not even worth listening to. He was analyzing, yes, Chris Cuomo is analyzing the shooting in Atlanta. Chris Cuomo, guy who's never been a cop, never been probably anywhere around the inner city. And he wants to analyze the Rayshard Brooks shooting that happened in the Wendy's parking lot after a guy that I want you to watch the video. It's 40 minutes long. These officers go out of their way to really be hands off with this guy. Total gentlemen the whole time. Total gentleman. And not aggressive. The cops were never, it was, to me, the perfect textbook execution of tactics from nothing to the shit hits the fan and working their way through the force continuum. You didn't see him put him in a chokehold. You didn't see him shoot him when he started wrestling. They were fighting him. And then when he grabbed the taser, they tased him. He kept running. And then, and believe it or not, tasers on some people, it's very effective. Some people, it maybe gets caught in their shirt, or usually, though, if you get it in, because it has these barbs that come out, and they're attached to these lines that come out, and they will actually strike the person, stick in them, and then that allows the contact to be made by the taser. Now, you can also touch the taser to the person and shock them as well. The majority of these tasers look like a yellow gun, most of them carry. They get into the wrestling match. Rashard Brooks grabs a taser. He gets tased, takes off running, and you can see in the video, he turns, and folks, this all takes place within, I don't know exactly the time frame, but it's like 30 seconds to no more than a minute. I mean, I don't even think it was a minute long. From the point they got up off the ground to the point he got shot was just a matter of seconds. And in those few seconds, and they're chasing him, he turns. And this is where, the medical examiner, everybody's saying that he was shot in the back. Oh, that's where the bullets entered him. But he had, at that moment, right before he is shot, he has the taser. He turns and points it at law enforcement. Granted, any of the time that this is happening, they could have shot him. Because as I've explained over and over again, you don't, first of all, non-lethal weapons, most non-lethal weapons are actually lethal. They could kill you. You get shot in the throat with a beanbag, you very well could die. Could crush your windpipe and you could die. You could get shot in the eye with it, and if it's close enough range, that could actually kill you. Same thing with a taser. You tase somebody the wrong way. People die from tasers every so often, getting tased by law enforcement, because it just hits them in a certain way, in a certain area, and the electrical current going through their body interferes with their electrical system in their body, and they die. You have to remember these same things can be used against police officers or people. And the Supreme Court, which is as shitty as could ever be, and especially today, they basically rake the Constitution over the coals today. There is no such thing as conservative. Well, there is some conservative justices, but there is no such thing as a independent thinking judge anymore. It just doesn't exist. We knew that going into it, but I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the Supreme Court did say years ago, and I went over this yesterday, that if a fleeing felon is armed or showing that there is an imminent threat of loss of life or serious bodily injury, and they either moving to a position of cover, or they are moving towards a group of people, for instance, or they are still presenting a threat to the officer, they can that is of serious loss of life, or serious bodily injury or loss of life, the officers can and should eliminate that threat. When I say should, I mean in a perfect world, which we are definitely not in now. And as Rashard Brooks is running, he turns his body as he runs and shoots the taser at the police officer within a second or 2 seconds, which when you're in a situation like this you think a second or 2 seconds goes fast now. When you're in a stressful situation, it is a blink of an eye. And the officer shoots him as he turns back to run. So it's not as though the officer was targeting the guy to shoot him in the back. This was unfolding, and you can see it in the video. He turns to shoot, and then as he continues to run, of course, as he runs in the direction he was going, his body is going to turn. After he pulls the trigger, he turns to continue running. Remember, that's still an active taser. And he gets shot, and it hits him in the back. Totally legal. Totally justified. But the world that we live in now, and the reason I'm bringing this up 2 days in a row, is because it's crazy time on television. Chris Cuomo is sitting there analyzing this and talking about how it was the biggest jackassery I've ever seen, talking about how they were just not fighting. They could have, he was talking as though he could have stopped that in a second in a fight. Chris Cuomo doesn't know anything about being a cop. And I want you to go to you can go to any of my social media. I put the video back up from 2016 where I took Carol Costello, a host from CNN, and Kirby Scott and I developed shoot, don't shoot scenarios. Went up to Zulu Airsoft Field up in Orange County, New York, and we put her through 3 scenarios. They only show 2 on TV. The first one, she gets shot. The second one, she shoots the victim. They didn't show that. And then the third one, she gets it right. But even then, the guy still had his hands in his pocket. And had that been filmed on body camera, I'm sure today people would have been saying they shouldn't have shot the guy. He had his hands in his pocket. But he also had a knife in his pocket. She didn't know that, but he got too close to her. And there was a report that he had already killed somebody. And she was instructed in how to use lethal force. And in her third one, she finally got it right. And you can see this in the video, in my video that I made. And it's the same thing here with Rayshard Brooks. And this Atlanta cop did his job. And what I'm seeing lately, whether it's teachers or cops or celebrities, they are going back, and if it's either an apology tour or your career and your very well-being is done. Done. It's not just a cancel culture anymore. These are things that potentially, if law enforcement looked into these and it wasn't, this past month of turmoil, and law enforcement looked into these things, they can actually arrest a lot of these people for injuring other individuals. When I say injuring, I'm talking about in their jobs and in their careers and in their the defamation of their character. Because if you show intent that that's what you're trying to do, and then you do it, you have literally carried out slander and defamation. But you're not going to see those now. It's hard to get anybody to even look at that stuff. And this is when they should be looking at it. Because what people are doing, exactly what's happening with this officer, is people are moving to make somebody into a racist or a killer or a murderer in this case, when he was just doing his job. And from everything I've been taught, and I've been through 3 police academies and through all of SEAL training, carried a weapon in other countries and in the United States for almost 20 years on official duty. Everything I was ever taught, the officer in the Atlanta shooting did exactly right. And Rayshard Brooks did everything wrong. If you comply, you are ensured that you are going to live. If you don't comply and you fight the cops, you're going to get hurt. And the potential is, if you grab a weapon, you're going to get shot. And it's proven why it should be that way. Now, I've talked again and again, I'm not going to go into an apology tour, but for those that may have never listened to this podcast before, I've talked at length about where law enforcement can be worked on and can be fixed. I watched Sean Hannity, and he came up with 4 steps needed to take to be taken to fix police community relations. None of it will work. Everybody thinks they're an expert. It won't work. And it's clear that these people that analyze these things, whether it's Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or politicians like the mayor in Atlanta or the attorney general in Atlanta or district attorney, whatever it is, they don't understand the reality of this job and how fast these things occur and the decisions that these police officers are tasked with in a moment. Now, I said yesterday, if it was me, I would have taken that guy's keys and sent him on his way. And I would have taken the hit, I would have taken the hit and said, listen, give me your keys. You're drunk. Walk home or get an Uber, but you're not getting in your car. And it's not even worth giving DUIs now. Because look what happens. Despite what people think, because I've also heard this narrative that he was just drunk. He was just drunk and he was fighting with the cops. And well, listen, it doesn't have to be PCP for you to go crazy on the cops. Drinking can also, and often does. How many of you been to a party or yourself gotten outrageously mad, and then the next day you're like, man, why was I so angry? Or man, I kind of overreacted a little bit, or that person overreacted. Drinking is a terrible producer. Besides social media, drinking produces more temporary muscles than any other act that you can do in your life. And that's what was going on with this guy. But it's gotten to a point where it doesn't matter if you follow the rules. It doesn't matter if you didn't do anything. If these people, these leftists, you have to remember this, okay? What is happening in this country is that leftists have gained control. They've gained control. And the game that they are playing now is a very, very dangerous game. One that I don't even want to use the term conservatives, but really the American people that are sitting back, and I know there's liberals that are sitting back saying, wow, I didn't exactly see this coming, or this isn't exactly what we mean by working with police and community relations. And we're in a position now where it may be too late to stop the tide that is flowing. I tweeted a little while ago that August 2020 is going to be the month where complete chaos overtakes this country. And somebody, of course, responds and says, well, why August? Why not November when the election is? Well, because as you can see, these things happen very quickly. The chaos happens very quickly, but also it has to be handled. Remember the Hegelian dialect that I talked about. You cause the problem and then offer the solution, right? So you're actually the one causing the problem, but you also offer the solution, and then you turn around and handle the outcome so that it fits the way you want it. And that's hard to do in a short amount of time, unless you're trying to extort somebody in particular and one individual, and it comes down to one thing that happens in time and space. But in order to get the country to react, as you can see, it doesn't take that long, but it needs a little bit more time than November, let's make this happen, and then the elections. I mean, there can be things, shootings or man-made, false flags. Remember, that false flag term used to be something that just Alex Jones and a bunch of people were saying, but now, I was watching an interview with the creator of LinkedIn, and he was talking about how they did a false flag down in Georgia and against a political rival. He paid for it. So when we look at what's happening right now and why I say August 2020, I didn't say August 1st or August 5th. The month of August is going to be, I believe, the most chaotic month that we've ever seen in our history, bar the Civil War and Revolutionary War. We're going to see, I believe, this is an educated prediction, and I could be wrong, but August or September, I'm going to say August because September is pushing it a little bit, but it may be September. September, August, what you're going to see is something similar that's happened here in the past 3 months. Remember, March is when the virus actually started coming. March, April, May, June. So let's say August, the virus kicks back up and something occurs that causes tensions to get worse and worse. I mean, it's already happening now, as you can see. It's not very hard to sit around. Yes, last year, 9, I've seen conflicting statistics, but it's either 9 or 10 black males were shot and killed by police when they were unarmed. Now, I will admit to you, I don't know each one of those situations, and I don't know what they're qualifying as unarmed. If it was a guy in a car driving towards the police, I don't know. Did they have in the many of these cases? Did they have an airsoft gun and they pointed it at cops and they got shot? See, I don't look at that as an unarmed shooting. I look at that as an awful mistake, especially if they didn't mean to. Or in the case of what I saw, I don't know where this was, but I sit and watch a lot of these videos of police chases, and so I can keep my mind fresh. And are they doing what they're supposed to do? I saw a police chase where the cops were chasing this guy. He had been going through the backyards of homes at night and robbing them. And this guy, I think, was a dad or something. I mean, it wasn't like he was just some kind of street thug. This guy was a little bit older. And they're showing it from first the helicopter's view with night vision, and then they show it from the officer's view. But he's eluding police officers, hides under a car. He jumps over several fences. The helicopter's still locked onto him. He goes around the back of a house that is not his, and he's hiding. And as the police officers come around the corner, this genius holds his cell phone up, which anybody in law enforcement or military has been through the scenarios where you go into the kill house. That's where we train, and they have the different pictures up there, silhouettes of could be a woman or a man, and they're holding something up. Usually it's a gun, and then sometimes it's a cell phone, and you got to decide not to shoot that person. This was at night after a police chase, and he holds a cell phone up in his hand, and he gets shot and killed. And I think it was LA, but I may be wrong about that. Total justified shoot. If that happened right now, that officer would be charged with murder. But as these things unfold towards the end of summer, I know summer just got here, but it's towards the end of summer, and actually getting into spring and towards November, but several months out, I believe there is going to be some type of meltdown because we will still have the virus. These tensions, these racial tensions are going nowhere, and it's only going to get worse because as good cops leave, political and bad cops are left, and cops are leaving the job, folks. They are leaving, and all across the United States. So you're still going to have this racial problem that has just blown up in this country. You're going to have the virus, and then you're also going to have millions of people with no job, and by August, they will have not had a job for 4 months. They're going to run out of money. We're talking about millions and millions of people. Their jobs, the fact that the companies they worked in don't even exist. 24-hour fitness filed for bankruptcy. Just saw that today. Now you throw on top of that, this is what's crazy about this. On top of all this stuff, you add in there buffoons like Dermot Shea, the commissioner of the NYPD. And he comes out today, folks. Remember, I was in the FBI here for 8 years. Every single partner I ever had, whether I was on the criminal side or the counterterrorism side, every partner that I had was a detective from the NYPD that was plain clothes. They were just like us. They wore jeans or suits sometimes, and they worked in on the street in plain clothes. Now, the crime unit, it's the plain clothes unit that they have where it's an anti-crime unit, street crimes. I don't know if that's the only street crimes is the one getting shut down, but even let's just say it's only street crimes, right? So those are plainclothes officers that roll around and answer calls, or they'll do surveillance. If they think something is going on, they'll watch to see what's happening, but they can respond very quickly, and it's a surprise. And they can also walk around with autonomy a lot of times because people don't know that they're cops. You go to Penn Station in New York City, they're all over the place. And this buffoon, I just look at him and I think buffoon, the commissioner of the NYPD, which is a highly respected position in law enforcement. This moron who is kissing the ass of communist Bill de Blasio, the mayor, has decided to get rid of the plain clothes and put everybody back in uniform. It doesn't make, actually, to tell you the truth, they're shutting down the whole unit. That's 600 officers. Folks, listen, 600 officers that were on the street in plain clothes, gone from the NYPD. They're all going to be put in uniform and put somewhere else. Who do you think is going to be affected by that? Well, everybody is. Particularly when I say everybody, the ability to hunt terrorists. Remember, we still have a terrorist problem. We're still a target. And as things open back up, it's going to be ripe for the picking. The other people that are going to be harmed by this are people in the inner city. I mean, New York is not going to be safe. Manhattan, it was one of the safest places in the world, believe it or not. We're not talking about above 120th Street. But Manhattan itself, the borough of Manhattan, one of the safest places in the United States. Not anymore. And it used to be terribly violent, and they still had these units. And it was still violent, but because of Giuliani came in there and cleaned the place up. And the way he did that was by putting a cop on every corner in certain areas where crime was up. And they shut the crime down. And see, the reason, and this is very important, the reason crime stayed down was because when you enforce the laws to the T with an officer on every block, you push the crime out of that area. Bad people won't stay there. I mean, listen, I truly believe, well, in some of these inner city places, you could probably do that and it would work. But, I mean, unless Commissioner Shea was just walking around with his thumb up his rear the whole time, he should know that you can't just stick a cop on every block in the 775 precinct. Those guys will get killed out there. And now there's no anti-crime unit that can go around in plain clothes in those areas. It makes no sense whatsoever. So you take this and you throw it on top of that heap of chaos that I mentioned a minute ago with the virus is still going to be here in August. The tensions are still going to be there in August that are happening now, the racial tensions. You're going to have people without work for 4 months with no money. They're going to start getting freaked out because, and you want to talk about backlash, that backlash could make what's happening now seem like nothing, because people are going to be struggling for their life at that point. Remember, in and around New York City, there's 8 million people that live here. They're not all rich. In fact, a lot of them are very poor and struggle to get anything. You add on top of that ridiculous leftist ideas like defund the police, or in the case of Shea, get rid of the plainclothes anti-crime unit, take 600 officers off of the street that were effective in fighting crime. They're going to blow this thing sky high. And I think it's going to boil over around August, sometime in August. That's what I believe. And it's going to increase until November. Through November, but it's going to increase through November. And what's crazy about all this is that it's literally been manufactured, as I talked about yesterday. If you didn't listen to yesterday's show, you should, by these incompetent leftists that are in the mayoral and governorships around the country, the city council people, and their incompetent, almost destructive decisions. And then when you throw on top of that, I mean, it is hard for me to even turn the television on and watch it. If I can't watch the news because it's absolute nonsense, whether it's, like I said, Fox News or CNN, you have the host giving their analysis of tactical situations. They've never been through this tactical training. They have no idea. And then when you turn over and watch something like The Walking Dead, if you haven't watched that, starts off the first 3 seasons of The Walking Dead are pretty good, but it becomes progressively left. And when I'm not kidding, it's visible. You can clearly see that they are leftist. The stuff that they're pumping out in there it's like you're watching a protest here. Seattle, it's no surprise that Seattle is the way it is. That's where so many of these people end up. They must like cold and rain. I know it's beautiful up there. Got a buddy up there, loves it, and people who go there often are so affected by the mentality that they completely forget about the reality of the oath that they took to defend, support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They completely forget about that. They just buy into the narrative that Trump is all bad. Even though up until a virus that he didn't create and a shooting that he wasn't responsible for, everything was pretty great in February and March of this year up until this stuff started. The economy was doing great. Racial tensions, I think those were always on the edge since Obama, but we hadn't seen a flare up. People weren't locked down like they have been, and that helped in all this stuff. He's done a pretty damn good job up until this point, when I don't know if anybody could handle what's happening right now, quite frankly. It's so chaotic. And everybody keeps coming out and saying, the president who should come out and speak and motivate the people. Today, or it was actually yesterday, Ron Perlman, you may remember him from the Sons of Anarchy and Hellboy. Well, first of all, he's one of the ugliest people in Hollywood, but he is a far left. And when I say left, he's a communist. There's no doubt about it. And Ted Cruz said something about Jim Jordan, and he starts coming back at Ted Cruz. And I think Ted Cruz has said something about somebody wrestling Jim Jordan because Jim Jordan used to be a wrestling coach. And the left is really there. You can see where these people orchestrate this stuff. Like they're going after Jim Jordan because Jim Jordan is one of the only people, I would say even more than Nunez, you would have thought he was going to have a home run, but he kind of has turned in, my opinion on Nunez is, he either got scared or he's just another Trey Gowdy who likes to talk about all this stuff, get mad, and then never do anything. I'm not real sure. If Nunez would have said, like literally, F this place, this is what's happening, thrown it all on the table and walked off the job, that probably would have done more for this country than anything else he could have ever done. Of course, people aren't going to do that once they get that cush job. But the left is really targeting Jim Jordan and saying some very vile stuff. Ted Cruz responds to that, and then all of a sudden, this moron, Ron Perlman, decides he's going to chime in because he's got so much experience in the world. And he's an activist. He's a leftist. So he says, why don't, to the effect with terrible language also, talking to a United States senator, I don't care if you like him or not, I'm not going to, and listen, until we're in battle, I'm not going to tell these people to go F themselves, especially not on Twitter. I'll be stern with them, but I'm not going to say that. And so he's talking like that, and he says that he challenges Ted Cruz to a wrestling match or a boxing match, and then if Ted Cruz wins, Ron Perlman says he'd donate $50,000 to Black Lives Matter, which, if you trace it back, somebody sent me this today, and we kind of went through the statistics. It is basically the Democrat Party. Black Lives Matter gets all the money goes to the Democrat Party that gets sent in there. In case you're a big Black Lives Matter donor. So he says he give $50,000. So I was so kind of appalled by him, and he's such a moron with no experience in anything except acting. So he said, I wrote him and said, basically, you win the Jackass Award for the most self-centered, virtue signaling tweet of the day. And then I went on to say, why don't you take all the money that you made from racist Hollywood, which Hollywood is visibly more racist than, if you want to talk about inclusion and making sure that everybody has an equal, like there's so many black people and Asian people and whatever on the screen at one given time. Hollywood is obviously racist. And so I said, why don't you take the money that you made from racist Hollywood and pay for a few kids of every color to go to college? And what happened was very interesting. I've been ratioed before, and ratioed, if you don't know, if you're not doing social media, is you'll put a post up. Like I put a post up of me laying in the bed, not naked, I had clothes on, but I was laying on the bed with some guns. And I put on there as the tweet and the words, the caption above the picture, that even though we have this whole bed, they always insist on cuddling with me. It's hilarious, right? Got ratioed. They got over 10,000 comments. It's still getting comments from the left. And what they do is they go in there to overwhelm it. So anybody who, like Second Amendment supporter or people that are my followers and that I know, you can't, it doesn't even do you any good to respond because you're just completely wiped out at that point. And so when I sent this response to Ron Perlman's tweet, started getting ratioed. So what I did was, at first it wasn't that much, but they were even saying it. Let the ratio begin. So they start doing it, and vile stuff. They're always very vile. And they all say the exact same thing. Like you will see the same basic tweet over and over and over and over and over, just different people copying it and then putting their own little spin on it and putting it up there. So what I would do is I would block all those people. So I spent like an hour blocking those. I was just playing the game, blocking all those people, delete the tweet, repost it, and then go through and block the people again. But by the time I did that 3 times, Ron Perlman's tweet had gotten over 150,000 likes. And I saw where this was going. I was going to get hammered. There's no doubt about it. But when you look at why that's happening, and there's no shame in getting ratioed. It's not like it's, you got to walk out there with your head. You're not losing a battle. It is a way to suppress your First Amendment. When they do this, they're not doing it to actually make any comments or insight into whether they think you're right or wrong. It's all about shutting down your freedom of speech and ratioing you so bad that you can't even respond with vile things that get people upset and angry. And you can't really pay attention to that when you're on Twitter. So why am I telling you this? Because one of the other things that I realized is that along with, I'm adding these things up, along with the virus that's still going to be there, along with the racial tensions and flare-ups, the breakdown of law enforcement and the justice system in a rapid fashion, along with all these people that are just completely out of work, completely broke, and have no money and no food. By August, what's going to be happening, the closer we get to the elections, social media is going to be destroyed for conservatives. Completely destroyed. And you will not be able to get your opinion in. You just will not be able to get your opinion in there because you will be ratioed. And this is when I read the story about McChrystal, the general, who's a total leftist. Everybody loved this guy, because the Rolling Stones article that came out and Obama relieved him. Everybody thought, which was probably a game. That whole thing was probably a game. They said that, everybody thought McChrystal is the greatest ever general in modern history, and he fought the Taliban, and he's a douchebag. He's a far left zealot, just like McRaven, the SEAL admiral, just like Green, the SEAL admiral, just like Mattis, the Army general. Jim Kelly breaks my heart because I thought that guy was really good and soft-spoken but very firm. I like that. And he just turns out to be the same way. The current Joint Chiefs of Staff and a couple other of these top generals. McChrystal he is working with a company that produces AI, artificial intelligence, to go on social media and shut down conversations. It was formulated to go against ISIS and the recruitment of fundamental Muslims, although they'll say radical, or from Muslims being radicalized. But the reality is they're just fundamental Muslims. And so the way this AI works is they pump, whenever you say something or you tweet something, if it shows that you are against one of their own, or you're pro-Trump, or you're conservative, you're going to get ratioed. And along with that, the social media companies themselves are also censoring you. So when all this happens, that is going to be thrown on top of it. Your ability, and the last hope in this country was social media, and now it's really just podcasts. I can do a podcast, and still right now I can say what I want to say, and that'll probably end as well. But as long as I can get the advertisement out there, then I can get, in word of mouth. So if you listen to this, make sure today you go out and tell 5 friends about the show, 10 if you can. But they're clamping down to the point where your ability to communicate and get real truth is going to be gone practically by August. And when you add that to all these other things that are happening, it is going to be a bad month. Now, it could happen before that. I think it's going to be August, because I'm using my tactics that I talk about, the attacker and defender mindset, in the book Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. I'm using the attacker mindset. You see, you can look at the way leftists have been working historically and in recent history, and you can start to put together a picture. You can take into account everything that's happened to Trump over the past 3-4 years. Remember, before he got elected, they were already talking impeachment. And you can look at the way that they create and manufacture evidence, the way they spin up any type of incident that happens into their own, and the way they create this tension, not only through media, but social media, and lies, flat out lies. And you can make these educated predictions. And that's what I'm looking at. That's why I came up with August, because I think they don't want to do something that's too close to November or too close to election, because it may not be able to be pushed up. And I'm not saying there won't be another flare up of all this stuff right before the election, but it takes time to get that thing churning, that machine, that tension machine. And so in August, if they start churning it up by the end of August to beginning September, it is going to be, I think, more chaotic than we've ever seen it in this country, at least in recent history. Now, one last thing that I want to mention here about that I'm going back to the news, and I'm seeing, and you're going to see reports of that today, that a man was taken to a local hospital where he was listed in critical but stable condition after a shooting between, it was a group of protesters that were trying to tear down Spanish conquistador statue in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And by the way, I drove through Albuquerque last year. It ain't my favorite place. I wouldn't stop there and sleep. I mean, I was tired, but I just kept driving until I got out way away from Albuquerque. Just a seedy place. You could feel the leftists in Albuquerque. And so they had an armed group, New Mexico Civil Guard, an armed civilian group. For all those of you out there that, I'm talking to two different groups of people right now. I'm talking about the groups out there that may be planning on what they will do if tensions occur. I'm not talking about people who are talking about going and doing assaults. Okay. I don't know what happened here, but if they were trying to guard the statue and these protesters started getting into it with them, if you show up with guns and somebody gets shot, do not assume that law enforcement is going to be on your side. And for all the law enforcement out there, you guys need to realize what happened in Atlanta could happen to you. It doesn't matter where you're at now. And there's going to be a point, if things continue to go the way that they are now, if things continue to churn at the pace that they're churning, you, and as law enforcement officers, are going to have to make a choice. Do you sit back and realize who the true domestic enemy is? Because it may not be the guys that are out there standing to protect property or fight against these leftists. I mean, the reality is it's not them. It's the leftists. And I've heard of other groups that are showing up because they're cop haters. They're dressed in fatigues and some other stuff. That's a real problem because they're being considered by the media as white supremacists. And the interesting thing about when they say white supremacists, the media is really lumping all people who have light skin into that. I don't know if you realize that or not. Because it doesn't matter whether you spent your entire life raised and in the mindset that there is no color. But now, if you have light skin and somebody doesn't like what you say, it could not be, it doesn't have to be racist at all. It could just be a different of opinion about water. And they're going to call you, you're going to be a racist. I'm telling you, it's a dangerous world we're living in. And cops out there, you need to start thinking about your career and who you're working for and how you might get jammed up. The system will turn on you just as fast as it'll turn on anyone else. And that has been clearly evident over the past couple of days. But here's the thing that law enforcement and civilians have to realize. You are facing government entities, media, social media, all controlled by the left. State and city governments around the country are controlled by leftists, and they are starting at this moment to show the true colors that they have. If you're in law enforcement and you do the right thing, it's clearly evident now you could be jammed up. And the guy that you actually go against because they're trying to do the right thing, or several people who are together to try to protect this country, you're going to have to decide, do you stand with them? Because if you don't, it may be your own undoing. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and we're out of here.